Welcome into another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com. John Alden with you as always. Glad to have you on board. Not sure if you guys can tell, but I'll go ahead and mention it right now so I'm not thinking about it the entire time. I'm sure you think might notice that my voice sounds a little bit different. I am fighting, I hope it's just a little bit of a cold. I don't really feel that sick, but I can definitely feel it in my voice. So hopefully that is the extent of what I am dealing with right now. But other than that, hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully your week is going well so far. I know it's only a couple of days in. We're back to releasing on a Tuesday. I'm sure many of you who made that part of your regular routine are happy about that. As always, never know if that's going to be the regular thing moving forward, but we'll always have to wait and see. Gonna have a couple of guests on today. Dustin Schutte is going to join us to talk a little bit of Indiana-Purdue, of course. Indiana basketball's next big matchup later on this week on Friday. Really their last chance for now I hate to say their very last chance. When it comes to road games, it's their last road game where you're facing somebody that really is an elite potential national title contender. So, and a team that you've already defeated once at Assembly Hall. So really good opportunity, chance at a big win if you're able to get the sweep against rival Purdue. So looking forward to chatting with Dustin about that. Also going to have the Hoosier.com's Zach Browning on to talk a little bit of Indiana baseball, amongst a few other things as well. But I want to check in on baseball a little bit specifically. I know we don't do that a ton on this show, but if you've been on social media in the last few days, Indiana baseball unfortunately went viral for the wrong reasons when it comes to their baseball team and what happened in the final game of their series against North Carolina. If you didn't see that, go check that out. We'll talk about it here in a little bit as well with Zach. But before we get into any of that, I'll go ahead and share my thoughts on some things. Also later on in the show, I do want to share a couple of other thoughts, by the way, on some football related matters. Trinidad Chambliss has been ruled eligible for, I believe, a 6th season after he was initially ruled ineligible by the NCAA, and Mississippi State Court kind of reversed that. And that's it's a good thing for them. Kind of it's another tricky, sticky situation, if you will, for college football. It seems like there's no consistency with anything, with any ruling, with players. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And then also the Big Ten has, or at least someone had leaked, I believe, that the Big Ten has an idea for a 2014 playoff. And Mitchell Page and I had a bit of an exchange before this even came out, by the way, on Twitter a few days ago, about why I think a 2014 playoff would be a really good thing if you eliminate bowl games. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit about that later on as well. I want to go ahead and start with kind of my current thoughts on where Indiana basketball stands. Of course, coming off very disappointing loss on the road at Illinois. Of course, we talked ahead of time that this 2-game road stretch of Illinois on the road and Purdue on the road, 2 teams in the top 10, 2 teams near the top of the Big Ten as well, of course. So it was really another one of the tougher 1-2 punches of the season, toughest remaining 1-2 punch of the season, if we're being honest. And the hope from that was, even if you aren't able to win both of these games, is that you look competitive. And Indiana did look competitive in that first half, I'll say 38-31 at halftime. And then there just came a point where the wheels fell off. And I think, we talked about it with a few people in the last couple of weeks, Zach Osterman, Kyler Staley, whoever it might be. But it just kind of feels like there's still inconsistency with this Indiana team. Like, they rely very heavily, of course, on Lamar Wilkerson to perform well. Connor Enright had a really good stretch of games before the Illinois game, and then he was completely non-existent. And again, sometimes that happens on the road. Sometimes it just happens in general, especially with somebody like Connor Enright and Lamar Wilkerson. They're not really on the same level when it comes to elitism, right? Like one player is someone who will likely potentially have a pretty decent pro career, and someone else is a transfer from DePaul who has fit nicely into what Darren DeVries has been trying to do, and it's just kind of a plug and play player for Indiana this season. And so it also just could have been a one-off negative performance from him. And so whenever you don't get all of your necessary contributors to be consistent night in and night out, you're not going to be competitive down the stretch against elite teams like Illinois. It's why they end up losing the game by 20 points. And again, it's a really good Illinois team. Brad Underwood's had that program rolling for quite some time now. I know they haven't like won a national championship or anything, but they are really, it's one of the better head coaches that Illinois has had in a while. And I feel like Brad Underwood's also a coach that's kind of gone under the radar. Like nobody really, his name doesn't never really come up when big jobs show up. And I've always been surprised by that. Maybe another deep tournament run. I know he got to the Elite Eight before getting smashed by Auburn a few years ago. So maybe getting to that Final Four would have been something different for him. And not that he doesn't have a big job already in the Big Ten with Illinois, because I'm sure he's satisfied where he's at. But I'm just really saying that I'm surprised that with bigger names or bigger jobs, that his name hasn't at least gotten thrown out. Curt Cignetti, his name gets mentioned with every job now because of what he's done at Indiana. Of course, what Brad Underwood's done, not the exact same thing. But again, I'm going down a rabbit hole that doesn't need to be gone down too deeply. Either way, it's a really good coached Illinois team, and Indiana's going to have a chance to bounce back. And I want to look over at kind of where they might stand when it comes to bracketology right now. Last time we checked in, Joe Lunardi kind of had them sitting on that 8 and 9 line. I guess right now, specifically, they're the 9 in his most recent edition of bracketology. By the time this episode comes out, he may potentially have released a new one. That's kind of what I want to talk about here. Where do I think Indiana will fall at this point after taking really a beatdown to Illinois, losing by as many points as they did, even though Illinois is a really good team? I think that's the type of loss that probably bumps you down a couple of seed lines to 11, which I think when you're the 11 seed and you're in a power conference, that puts you in the last 4 in games in Dayton, which is, of course, a spot that Indiana's really been flirting with for the last several years. So it kind of goes back to what I talked about a few weeks ago with Indiana feeling like Indiana basketball specifically feeling like they're in Groundhog Day. So kind of the same old. They do have a chance to kind of right the ship a little bit later this week, and that's what we're going to talk about here in just a few moments with Dustin Schutte. So that's kind of where we're at once again with Indiana basketball. You get a few highs, and then the roller coaster goes back down again for a game or two, and then you get hope again, and then it's just an endless cycle of just being in no man's land. So we'll go ahead and continue this, hopefully in a more conversational way, with our friend Dustin Schutte. So joining me now here on In Touch with Indiana Sports, good friend of the show, longtime friend of the show, Dustin Schutte of Purdue on SI. I'm going to give you a little bit of inside baseball real quick. I just asked Dustin right before we got rolling. I said, hey, just want to get this right. What's the site that you work for? And I said the site that he worked for correctly, or that he runs, I should say. And I can't even say his own name correctly. I called him Justin Schutte and not Dustin Schutte. So my apologies, my friend.
That's okay. We've known each other long enough. It was a Freudian slip. It happens.
A Freudian slip. Are you getting excited? You and I had a bit of it wasn't really a back and forth on social media, but I made a comment earlier about how somebody down my street was already firing up their lawnmower. All you responded with was mow the lawn. But like, are you a grass cutting guy? Are you someone who's going to be firing up the lawnmower here in mid-February?
No, I will wait until an appropriate time to fire up the lawnmower. But I do enjoy. So I don't know how to describe this. So our home is it's a small front yard and a small backyard. So we have a push mower that we use.
Same.
However, there are steep like inclines at certain points. So it's kind of a pain in the butt at times because you got to like go uphill, but also you're on an incline. Like you are at some sort of weird 45-degree angle, and it is a testament of your arms and leg strength. So you get a workout in when you mow the lawn, cut the grass, however you prefer to use the verbiage there.
Dude, that is my life. I also have a ridiculous incline. It's not, and again, it's not that it's a super high incline, but it's annoying enough, and it's throughout the
Yes.
entirety of the yard to where it's in the
Ooh.
summer months, it makes it hell, but it's not too bad in these first few months of cutting the grass. But yeah, were you to say something else?
I was going to ask, do you have close neighbors? Do you have neighbors close
Oh
by?
yeah, we're all on. I mean, not like right on
Okay.
top of each other, but there's some space in between a little bit.
So we have none. So that's the other problem is like if I fall, like if something happens, it's going into the neighbor's situation. So that's part of the problem. So you have to be careful. And like where it grows, it's not all grass. So there's a lot of weeds in there. And so it's a pain. But I do
Yeah.
enjoy mowing the flat parts of the lawn.
Yeah, those are the easy parts.
Or even just like if you have to go, so like straight up and down is not bad. I don't mind that, but it is literally when you're going up and you have to be like sideways. That's what
Yeah.
bothers me. The straight up and down is fine.
So if you're somebody who hasn't cut your grass yet in mid-February, which I'm sure you haven't, bravo to you. But if you are, then I'm just going to assume that you have nothing else to do with your life right now, and you're just that eager to get out and about. And I guess more power to you. But we're not here to talk about that, even though we just spent the first 3 minutes of the segment doing just that. We got Indiana versus Purdue part 2 in Mackey Arena this Friday. The Hoosiers took game 1 in Assembly Hall earlier this season, but Purdue, they've kind of refound their footing, I feel like, Dustin. What's it been like the last few games for the Boilermakers as they enter into the final stretch of the season?
Yeah, so this happened last year too. It's like Indiana caught them at exactly the right time at Assembly Hall, and you kind of thought that the one way Indiana was going to beat them was by shooting a lot of threes and making a lot of threes. I don't remember what the percentage was on that given night, but I think the bigger issue was Purdue just looked like they were disinterested for a percentage of that game. And, you know, they had a 23-19 lead. I think that's what the score was. It was definitely a 4-point lead. Then Indiana just blitzes them on a 21-5 or 6 run to close out the half, and completely different ball game. And Purdue made some runs there in the second half and wasn't able to come back. But after that, they had another one of those players only meetings, and they've been able to rattle off a couple in a row here. They looked really good against Nebraska. The way that they got off to a hot start, you know, kind of let that lead slip away. And then, but we're just dominant on the glass. Win that rebounding battle 54-37 against Iowa. They crashed the glass. They win that rebounding battle 38-30 and a lopsided win on the road. So, you know, Purdue's been playing a lot better. And when Purdue's at its best is when they're rebounding at an insanely high level. And that's what they've been able to do here these past couple games. So, yeah, I mean, I think Purdue has found its groove a little bit here now. And I still think that IU is a dangerous team because of the way they can shoot the three and the way Lamar Wilkerson can go off. But I think if Purdue locks in and rebounds the way they're capable of, it should look similar to the Indiana-Illinois game from the weekend.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about Indiana is that, I mean, really, I've said this a few different times now, so I'm starting to feel like it's a broken record, even though this is a new cast of characters. Like, it's a new head coach. You have a brand new roster. Indiana finds himself in the exact same position when it comes to postseason prospects that they've been in for really the last 5-6 years, maybe even go beyond that. And with this team in particular, it feels like most of the time they live and die by the performance of Lamar Wilkerson. Now, if he's hitting his average like he did against Illinois, and you're not getting much help from Tucker DeVries, Nick Dorn, Connor Emright in particular against Illinois, then you're not going to get much overall when it comes to results for this Indiana team. Now, at the same time, though, Wilkerson is a player that really Indiana hasn't seen in quite some time, at least, you know, on their roster. And to have the ability when you have someone who can carry you to victories, that's a rarity that not a lot of teams have, and the elite of the elite do. But Indiana's at their best when not only Lamar's at his best, but when he's getting the help from the role players. But again, Indiana's shown throughout the season that they're not consistent enough from their role players that they can get to that upper level of of the Big Ten on a consistent basis. That makes sense. They can win on a one-off night, but expecting Indiana to just go into Mackey Arena and play the way they did in Assembly Hall, I wouldn't think that's something that, especially coming off of that Illinois game, it's something that would be surprising to say the least if Indiana looks like the team that won a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the one caveat is if Lamar Wilkerson has one of those days where he just goes for 35 or 40 points, I mean, you can beat anybody on any court. We saw that a few years ago with Jalen Hood-Schifino. Like Purdue they won the Big Ten by 3 games. They got beat by Indiana in Assembly Hall, and Indiana had a solid team that year, and it wasn't. I think it ended up being like a 4 or 5 point finish in that one, but there were some plays late that Purdue could have made to win that game, but you just kind of write that off to a rivalry game. But then Jalen Hood-Schifino, just hit what felt like 37 2-pointers in that game because Purdue played drop coverage and he just went off from mid-range. And if Lamar Wilkerson's capable of doing that, like I have said, if Indiana had to play a bunch of 5-game series against teams, I don't know that they'd make it out of the first round of the NCAA tournament. But when you have a player like Lamar Wilkerson and you can get him to be productive on any given night, like you can look at like guys similar to Kemba Walker at UConn, Carson Edwards at Purdue. If they just heat up and go off, it's hard to stop them. And so I legitimately think Indiana, if they get like something along those lines from Lamar, they could have a Sweet 16 caliber team if they make the NCAA tournament, which right now it looks like they're in the field. It's just a very interesting Indiana team. They're not great defensively. They don't rebound the basketball at a high level, but their willingness to shoot the three, they have that X factor in Lamar Wilkerson, and Nick Dorn has played. I mean, you follow it a lot closer than I have recently, but I know going into that Purdue game, he had been playing well, and then he hit a couple big time threes in that game as well. Yeah. So I think this is a team, Indiana, I'd like if they were a little bit older and had more experience. Like if this team could gel together, I think that would be, an ideal situation, but everybody's still so new to this program, and it's hard to kind of get that all together to work in sync in a 1-year span.
Yeah, it's not that there are a lot of older guys on this team, but again, they're all brand new to the system, and not everybody can be a Kurt Cignetti, right? I guess I had to throw my Kurt Cignetti mention in there. I feel like I do it every show in some way, shape, or form. But it feels like with this Indiana basketball team that their floor is very low, but their ceiling can also be very high. And maybe I'm giving a whole big nothing burger with a claim like that, but I think that it kind of correlates to whenever I mention that they live and die by Lamar Wilkerson's performance, because when you're as good as your best player and your best player is that good, then you can beat teams that maybe you wouldn't on an average night. But at the same time, Indiana has losses on their schedule to Minnesota. They didn't look good against USC, or they looked okay. It was a West Coast road trip. We lost to USC. It's not a terrible USC team. They've had questionable performances during different moments of the season. They've lost big to a lot of really, really good teams. Illinois, Michigan, Iowa made them look pretty bad on their home floor. Nebraska came back on them when they had a huge lead on them at Assembly Hall. There have been a bunch of moments throughout the year where they're just head scratching for multiple reasons. It's just they haven't been able to put it all together. And every team has stretches like that throughout the season. That's just the nature of college basketball. But the confusing identity of this Indiana team makes it really hard to predict which version of Indiana you're going to get on any given night.
Right. And I think the one, the thing to me that makes the difference in this second matchup for Purdue is I really do think that they're going to, I don't want to say take it personally because they did it to themselves, but I think they're going to carry a chip into their shoulder that they didn't rebound and they didn't play hard in that game for an extended period of time that allowed that one to kind of slip away. And so I do think Purdue's going to come out with their hair on fire and be ready for that one. But again, if you get a night where Lamar Wilkerson is just feeling it, like we saw Keaton Wagler fill it up for 46 against Purdue just a few weeks ago. Like those kind of games can happen. And so, I mean, the dog just laps up water at the most inopportune times, John. I don't know if anybody else can hear it.
We love Biscuit.
We do, but at the same, he just every time, doesn't matter when I'm recording, at some point in the middle of a sentence, he's just going to start slurping up his water. But I think Purdue it's going to take the fact that it didn't play well against Indiana in Assembly Hall. Personally, I think they feel like they should have won that game. It's going to be really interesting though, because Indiana has had, I would say, Purdue has had the better team a lot of the time in the last whatever it is, 4 years.
Not even
now.
A lot of the time. I don't remember the last time, like as a whole, like on paper, that Indiana had the better team against Purdue.
But their record is 3-4 against the Hoosiers. The senior class's record is 3-4. So they have to win. They have to win on Friday to get to 500. It is legitimately one of the most bizarre statistics. And there was a run in there for Purdue that they won 9 straight, and I don't know that Purdue always
that was
had
the Archie Miller era. Archie Miller did not beat Purdue one time.
Yeah, but also Tom Crean at the end of his run.
The end of Tom Crean. I didn't know that went back to Tom Crean. Okay.
Yeah, maybe his last year, or maybe his last 2 years. I don't remember which, but there were some times I think they may have only played once. But there were some times there where Purdue was not the better team, and they came away with like I remember. I think it was when Bob Knight came back, Purdue won that game, and Purdue was they were middle of the pack Big Ten. They were not a good team, and Indiana was near the top of the conference.
Loss.
So the point being is that you just never know what's going to happen in these rivalry games. I do think Purdue has the edge. I think they found their motivation. Trey Kaufman-Wren's been playing at an insanely high level. He's had 31 rebounds in his last 2 games. Just for people to know, we're recording this on Monday night, so they haven't played Michigan as I'm speaking about them.
I wanted to get into that. I want to step on your toes, but go ahead and finish what you were going to say, because that's where I was going next.
But they've Purdue's rebounded at a high level. They shot a lot better against Iowa. The fact that they've been crashing the glass offensively, I think, is a step up. And then they've been playing defense a little bit better, and they don't have to be great with as efficient as they are on the offensive end. They don't have to be great defensively. They just have to be good. And so that's why I think this is going to be an uphill climb for Indiana. But again, a couple of years ago, there was a last second like Purdue almost lost to Indiana on their home court because of I think it was Jalen Hood-Schifino shot a 3 and missed it at the end of regulation. Last year, it was a terrible Miles Rice play away from Indiana leaving with, sweeping last year. So you never know in these games. Both teams are going to come out motivated and fired up, and we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be an exciting game, but it's one of those that I think this is going to sound maybe counterproductive here. I feel like it's a game that's going to come down to the wire, and either team is going to win, or Purdue's going to just, go off and win by 20. I don't feel like there's a scenario where Indiana wins this going away.
Yeah, that would have to be if Indiana in the very low chance wins in a blowout. It would be Lamar Wilkerson has another career high, and nobody on Purdue is just able to have a response. Which again, I don't see that scenario happening in any situation this Friday. But you mentioned the Michigan game. Okay, so real quick, this is coming out on Tuesday morning. Games Tuesday night. There'll probably be people who watch this show after the Michigan game happens, but for those who are watching this before it happens, how much of the result and performance for Purdue against number 1 Michigan right now, do you think it'll have that big of an effect over what happens going into the game on Friday, or a potential hangover from a win over a team like Michigan right now, or a loss, an unfortunate loss, whatever that might look like? Can you see that playing a factor at all on Friday?
I mean, it's hard for me to say no, because you're still dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. And whenever you have that, there's always going to be a psychological component to it. So I think that there's a good chance that it does. If Purdue were to not somehow lose, Michigan's very good. It's not like this would be a throwaway game. If Purdue loses to Michigan, they're pretty much out of the Big Ten title race. I think they'll come out PO'd about the fact that they're not in the race with this senior class. And try to be out to prove a point, because the other part of this, John, is too, they're still trying to improve and give themselves the best seed possible for the NCAA tournament to try to make a run for the Final Four. If they beat Michigan, I could see a little bit of a hangover effect there. But what we just saw in terms of Purdue clinging and getting a thrilling, overtime win over Nebraska, they came out against Iowa on the road and just pummeled them from start to finish.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is a veteran-led team, the fact that they've been through just about every scenario possible, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact regardless of result. But it always could. I think if I'm an Indiana fan, I think I would hope that they don't lose. I don't, I think you have a better chance of, getting a little high and mighty if you beat the number one team in the country and you're back in the Big Ten race, as opposed to if you lose to Michigan, then Purdue's going to be out to prove a point, and they get this one on their home court as opposed to playing the game in Assembly Hall.
My one argument against that would be if Michigan comes into Mackey and just owns, wins by a lot. I think that's a scenario where that could play to Indiana's benefit, because you're like, wow, and Michigan just came in and ran in Mackey, which I wouldn't expect them to do. So that may be one other scenario I would throw out in terms of if you're Indiana, what you might hope for, thinking about looking ahead to Friday. Yeah. So I guess one last thing we'll end on this. What do you foresee? Like, not even, we'll just throw away the result on against Michigan. How do you see things playing out on Friday? I'm not necessarily asking for a score prediction, but how do you think the game will play out?
I was impressed when the game was at Assembly Hall. I thought Indiana, for as new as this team is, and sometimes rivalries maybe don't mean as much to the players as they do to the fans now, because players don't necessarily have those 3, 4, 5 years within a program where they build up kind of that hatred and appreciation for a rivalry. But I was impressed. I thought Indiana took that game very seriously. I thought they were into the rivalry. And that's a big reason why I thought that they won. I think that, Purdue's goal with Lamar Wilkerson will be to make him shoot more than he scores. So if he scores 25 points, Purdue's okay with that as long as he's shooting the ball around 25 times. They don't want him to get 25 points on 13 or 14 shots. And so I think that they're going to kind of, I think they're going to put the clamps down defensively. But I think the biggest difference in this game to me, and why I think Purdue's going to win, is they've just been so aggressive on the glass these last couple games. I think that that's going to continue. And Indiana really this season has rebounded poorly, and that's a reason why that they haven't maybe been as consistent as they would like. So I think even Purdue loses the last game, they out-rebounded Indiana by 5. And that's a team that they can out-rebound by 12 to 15. If that's the case, and you're crashing the offensive glass, I think Purdue's going to get a win there. But again, the one thing I hate about this, John, is the fact that Indiana has Lamar Wilkerson, and you can never just account for the fact that those guys can just go off at any given time. They can score 30 or 40 points. So it's going to be interesting.
The thing, though, without Lamar Wilkerson, Indiana's a below average team. And I hate to admit that, but without him, they need someone like him. They've not had, and it's been a very long time. I said this earlier, so I won't spend much time on it. It's been a very long time since Indiana's had to rely on somebody this elite. You had Trace Jackson Davis, but it seemed like you always had somebody else to kind of complement him. It's been, at least in my lifetime, I don't think Indiana has ever had a singular player that is this elite where they can carry them to wins like this. But my apologies for stepping on your toes there.
No, you're good. I would. That's a good question. My thought, I don't know if Indiana's ever had, so like a guy like Victor Oladipo or Yogi Ferrell could have probably carried, but I don't know that
there was enough pieces with them though.
They did not have to the way Lamar Wilkerson has to, if that makes sense. And I think that's probably what you're saying. So yeah, I think this is going to be another. Man, I really don't know. I can honestly, and I'm not being a homer here. I could see this game being done early where Purdue just comes out and flexes their muscle, knocks down a couple early threes, and steals Indiana's will. Or if Indiana gets it going, Purdue doesn't defend the 3-point line well, and you have, Tucker DeVries knock down 1 or 2. You get Nick Dorn who knocks down 1 or 2. Lamar hits a couple. If that happens, and look, Lamar was 2 of 9 in their first game from 3-point range, and Indiana still won. I think he finished with 19 points on 18 shots or 18 points on 19 shots, one of the two. So I really don't know how this game's going to go. It could come down to the wire, back and forth, or Purdue just runs away. Like I said, the only thing I don't envision happening is Indiana running away with this game from the start.
I think we'll know what type of game we're going to get before the first TV timeout. And maybe that's premature, but there have been a couple of moments. I go back to the Louisville game in particular with Indiana. They got completely bombasted by Louisville in a non-conference game in Indianapolis earlier this year. And Indiana played well after that initial spurt from the Cardinals, but that opening frame was enough. They couldn't make up for that. And so if Indiana, if they show that they're firing on all cylinders early and they don't let it, if they don't dig themselves a hole, I think you'll see this game come down to the wire, as you mentioned. But at the same time, Purdue more than has the ability to deliver a knockout punch in the first 5 to 8 minutes of this game. And that's why I think it'll be pretty pivotal how Indiana comes out in it as well. So I feel like you and I are on the same page with this one.
We're very similar. The one thing I would say to Indiana fans, though, is don't turn the TV off if they get down 10 to 12 points early. The reason being is because Purdue, with the exception of the Iowa game recently, they had a 12-point lead in the first half against UCLA. They lost. The game was tied at halftime. They had 2 double-digit leads against Illinois. Illinois closed it to 4 by the half, and Purdue ends up losing late in that game. Indiana, again, I already mentioned the Indiana game. Oregon, they were up 8, and then Oregon cuts it to 2 at half. So there have been games where Purdue and against Nebraska, 22-point lead, and you have to win that game in overtime. So you build those leads so that you have a little wiggle room if other teams do go on a run. But Purdue has let some of those slip away, and it's resulted in some losses. So again, because you have some guys that can hit shots, and primarily I'm talking about Nick Dorn and Lamar Wilkerson, when you have guys who can hit shots, you're never really out of it. And Purdue has had some of these leads slip away. So I think Purdue fans want to see, hey, jump out to an early lead, cling to it, and just steal Indiana's will. If you're Indiana, if you just hang around, you're going to give yourself a shot in the last 4 minutes. I think that's all you really ask for from this team.
We'll see what happens on Friday. Dustin Schutte, thank you as always. Purdue on SI.com. And I would say check him out, but I know most of you, if not all of you, are IU fans. But go easy on it. Sometimes people in the comments are like, why are you having this Purdue guy on? No, Dustin's great. He's a reasonable Purdue fan. Hopefully he thinks I'm a reasonable Indiana fan. And we're all going to be happy and we'll be nice to each other, even though I told Dustin to cry about it on social media.
He did. That was a terribly officiated last 30 seconds, but that's a different conversation. Look, I said the same thing about Nebraska, Michigan a few weeks ago. So that was also awful. I do have one question for you. How much championship merch did you purchase?
How much? So,
or have you?
I'll try to give you. I've already gotten all of it's come in. It's not a ton. I feel like it's a reasonable amount, and there are some things I still wish I could get. But I got the official championship shirt. The one that the players got to wear. Nice. I got a mug. I unfortunately don't have the mug with me right now, but if you're ever on again, I'll show it to you. I'm sure it'll make your eyes bleed. And then my wife also got a shirt that says 16-0 undefeated, something like that. And then I don't have this behind me right now, but I've got a frame. It's kind of like it's just the outline of the state of Indiana, and inside it just says 16-0. So that's going to go up behind me here very soon. That's the custom made thing. It's not a thing I bought. So, but there were a few other things I wish I could have. There were so many. All of it was so expensive. So expensive.
Oh, yeah, I know. You just got to get a few memorable items. So that's, but the one thing I was, talking about is, and I talked with one of my good friends who's an IU grad and, living it up, and he bought a bunch of merch as well. But I remember Mitchell saying years ago that all those people, if you're listening, can't see, John behind him has a panoramic shot of Indiana's football stadium, a Memorial Stadium. And Mitchell Page told us, former IU football player, that a lot of those, or all of those photos, are basically when Indiana plays Ohio State, because the Reds match. Now, John, the last year and a half, really, you could probably do that for a lot of games, and it doesn't have to be Ohio State.
Oh my gosh, I can.
You can get a brand new one, and it is mostly Indiana fans now.
This offseason, I'm going to have to find a way to replace this Indiana Memorial Stadium frame, because really, since Kurt Cignetti arrived, at least for the majority of the games, the stadium's been sold out with IU fans in the seats, which is, again, I'm living in a dream with Indiana football. It makes Indiana basketball a lot easier to deal with, even though it is aggravating that they're still in the same position that they've been in for what seems like forever now. But yeah, I'm more than happy with what Indiana football's done for me the last 2 years.
I can imagine that. Yeah, it's I still legit, and I'm not just saying this, I legitimately still can't believe it. Like, I don't, it feels like when it happened, like anytime I see it, I'm like, I don't think that's correct. And when I go, I co-host a podcast with a good friend of mine. He's a Penn State guy. And we always talk about, Big Ten football for an hour once a week.
Is it Jake Myers?
No,
is
it is
Jake
not.
Myers? Okay, no, I was curious. You said Penn State fan. I was curious.
Oh no, I've been working with this guy for I don't know, 8-10 years maybe. Anyway, and so we just have fun. And every time I talk, I'm like, Ohio State, Michigan, and I have to remind myself, you throw Indiana in there because it's not a diss on Indiana. It's not that I don't want to talk about them. It's the fact that I'm just so not accustomed to mentioning them with those other teams that I have to remind myself, say Indiana here, because that's the team that's another team that can win the Big Ten again.
The last time you came on this show, it was during football season. And I can't remember if we talked about this, and then I'll let you go. I know we've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but I can't remember if we had this conversation on the air or off the air, but it was whether or not Indy or if Kurt Cignetti would stay. This is before the extension, all that sort of thing. And I'm sure whenever we had that conversation, Indiana winning a national championship was not a realistic possibility to you, even to most Indiana fans. You probably thought maybe they'll go on a deeper run in the college football playoff. And I remember we said that if Indiana could advance further than what they did the previous season, then Cignetti would say, okay, I can continue to do this. There's no reason to jump away. Well, he's skipped all further steps and gone straight to doing the impossible, which is winning a title at the losingest program in the history of college football. And I'll never get sick of saying that. I'll never get sick of any of it. There's going to be a movie about this team one day. And I would say I would encourage you to go back and listen to mine and Mitchell's championship special, but I'm sure that will just make you want to throw up. But I feel like it sums up everything perfectly. I wouldn't trade the last 2 years of Indiana football for anything else when it comes to what I want out of being a sports fan.
Nor should you. I mean, that's what you live to. I mean, that's why you're a fan. It's still crazy to me that they were able to do what they did. And yeah, I very vividly remember having that conversation. I don't remember if it was before or after they beat Oregon, but basically the idea of there's going to be a lot of job openings if Indiana goes 10, because I think it was before Oregon, because I remember thinking if Indiana goes 10-2, make the playoff, and they lose again, does he think about like, maybe I can't do it at Indiana, I got to go somewhere else. But I mean, it ended up not having to worry about it. Clearly he can do it, and they're poised to make another run this coming year. But again, every time I see Indiana national champion, it's just like, oh yeah, that did happen. And it's not a slight. It's just one of those things. Like, I think if Northwestern did the same thing in basketball, I'd be like, what? Oh, that did happen. I don't
think it will truly sink in. Like, I think it sunk in to a degree, but I think like looking back on it and like just knowing that is fact, I think a whole nother season of college football is going to have to go by and Indiana not win it and, no longer be the reigning champions to kind of realize, okay, last year was something that I'm going to say won't be replicated, but will be extremely difficult to ever have happen again in the manner in which it did.
Yeah. Here's the one thing that I'll say too, and then we'll close this out because we've gone on a tirade here. But
I appreciate it. You brought up Indiana football and I ran with it.
The one thing I would say is I do wonder, and this is not a knock on, I'm not trying to say this as a knock on anybody. I just think it's a legitimate reality. I almost wonder if it happened too fast for people to appreciate it. If that makes any sense at all, where if Cignetti had been there 6 to 8 years and you had been, consistently between 9 and 12 wins every year, consistently in the playoff in the Big Ten hunt, but maybe couldn't get over the hump, and then you win it, then you feel like, oh, we finally did it. And you have then you have 6 to 8 years of investment. And this is not me trashing Indiana fans, but until midway through last season, they still weren't bought in. And fairly enough, right? Like they've seen this before where things start off really good and then they go off the rails. And it's like, in the snap of a finger, they were all of a sudden, oh, we're really good at football. And I just don't know if your brain had time to process how quickly all of it happened. And again, I'm not meaning that as a slight, but I think if any team had the 2-year run like Indiana did, and they had in any sport, and they had been so perennially awful, I don't know if any fan base would know how to react to that. It just happened so quick. If you have 6 to 10 years to build up and grow an appreciation for it, then it may be a different story. So hopefully that comes off as like, I don't know how to describe it.
No, I think it makes sense because I think even from Mitchell and I's perspective, I think we knew that this year's Indiana football team was really good, but we didn't really start talking, okay, this team can actually do this until they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. That was probably the first time that something went off like, okay, they've done something that they haven't done in 30 plus years. And that was the perceived best team in the country. Why can't they do this? But it's because the national media, really for the last 2 seasons, they were calling Indiana frauds. And, and you say in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, maybe Indiana is just good for Indiana and they're never going to be, more than that. And so Indiana fans were being fed all of this, I'll call it nonsense now because that's exactly what it was. I guess we didn't really know that it was nonsensical at the time. But it's just so hard when you're so accustomed to just being trash, at least historically, for so long. Right. And I guess, the national media is the same way. Like, it's hard for everybody. That's why all of it was just a big, I'm not going to use an expletive here, but it's just a brain explosion for everybody involved, local and national people, because it doesn't make sense to say that Indiana Hoosiers are national champions in Indiana football. And I totally agree with your sentiment because that's just the reality of things. And Dustin, I appreciate your extended time on the extended segment. I'm glad I got to gush more about Indiana football. I haven't done that in a while. I've tried to put it on the back burner because I know I've got to focus on basketball, but it's really hard to not put it on the back burner when it's going to be, I think I appreciate it. I know you're saying some people can't appreciate it. I think the deep appreciation will come for everybody, as the years pass.
Yeah, I don't think it's that people can't appreciate it. I think it happens so fast that it's not like you don't have to go through they didn't have to go through the growing pains, I guess I'll say. Now you could say that
every other year was the growing pains.
That's a good point, but they never had that pain of kind of getting there and then not having the ultimate success, I guess. It's a weird thing in my hopefully it makes sense. I'm not telling anybody that they don't appreciate it. I just think like I don't, because I can't comprehend it. And I think it's because it happened so fast. If this had been happening every year for 6 to 8 years, I'd be like, yeah, Indiana was really good for a long time. It doesn't surprise me they won it. But the fact that it's just everything turned on a dime like that, it's crazy. So
Dustin, thanks again. We'll check in again at some point. Who knows when it is, but I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, John. It's always fun.
A big thanks to Dustin Schutte for all that he brings to the table each and every time we have him on. I know some people cringe like, oh my gosh, he's a Purdue guy. But those who are longtime listeners of the show or people who have been around shows that I've been involved with for a while know that Dustin Schutte is a good friend of mine. And no, he's not just any Purdue fan. He's a good dude. So I know he would say the same thing about me as an IU fan. I'm sure he doesn't like certain IU fans. So always glad to have Dustin Schutte on the show. And wish him the best of luck, or do I? No, I wish him the best of luck, not the Boilermakers, of course. But let's go ahead. We're going to move over now to a little baseball talk. We're going to talk with the Hoosier.com's Zach Browning about what went wrong for IU baseball in their first 3-game series of the season on the road at North Carolina. What's to come? Can they bounce back? Was it a fluke? And we'll get all of his thoughts and much more right now. Joining me now from the Hoosier.com, it is staff writer Zach Browning. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
What's up, John? Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on, as always. Whenever you've been on, we've talked about it, a number of things, football, basketball. But this is, I want to say it's like your time to shine, because it's always your time to shine. But I know you do play-by-play for IU baseball. Baseball season just got underway this past weekend. Indiana Hoosiers traveled down to Chapel Hill to take on the number 11 North Carolina Tar Heels. I know you weren't doing play-by-play for this particular series, but what do you make? We'll just start with this. What do you make of the return of college baseball season and IU heading into the spring?
Well, I just think college baseball in general is fun. I mean, it's just a little bit of a different kind of vibe, a different feel to it. Baseball's got a little bit of a different feel to it in general as opposed to basketball and football. And college baseball is all about the fun. Well, most of the time about the fun. And I think it's just the sheer amount of games, the sheer quantity of games, stuff that's crazy that you've never seen happens all the time. There's a kid that hit 3 grand slams on opening day. Nobody's ever seen that before. It's just you see things in college baseball all the time that you never see, and that was the case with Indiana this past weekend as well.
Yeah, and we'll get into a particular moment here in just a few moments, but a lot of marquee, I say a lot, there's at least a few marquee non-conference matchups for Indiana. In particular, you got coming up this Friday, number 2 LSU down in Jacksonville. LSU, one of the most, not even one of the most, the most successful, bringing money in. They're the place to be if you're a head coach and you get to choose your job in college baseball. I would bet 99.9% of people would say LSU is the top job in the sport. What does it mean for Indiana playing in a game like this? And do you think that they have a chance? And I know that we'll talk about what happened against North Carolina here in just a second, but putting all that aside for a moment, when you think about what's on the roster and what expectations are like for IU, do they have a fighter's chance against the Tigers?
Probably not. LSU is the number 2 team in the country, and Indiana not sort of on the bubble probably is where you would assume, somewhere on that NCAA tournament bubble come time for the NCAA tournament selection show much later in the season. 56 game regular season college baseball season, and Indiana just 3 games in, so there's plenty of time for the Hoosiers, but probably somewhere on that bubble. But LSU, it's a different animal. I mean, I think LSU, even up 9 spots from North Carolina, who's number 11, that's a completely different animal. And Indiana only has them for 1 game because it's kind of like it's the Jacksonville Baseball Classic down in Jacksonville, Florida. So you've got UCF, who's going to be really good this year too. That'll be a tough challenge for Indiana. Notre Dame, who's kind of off and on, probably not great this season, but we'll see. But I think in general, the non-conference schedule, Jeff Mercer, the head coach for the Hoosiers, anytime he's scheduling a non-conference schedule, you've seen Indiana go to Clemson these past couple of years, go down to Coastal Carolina, Duke. Indiana likes to challenge themselves in non-conference play. It's kind of twofold. A, it's not super easy to play outside in February in the state of Indiana, in the Midwest in general. So a lot of teams have to go down south and further south to kind of play some of these non-conference games. But also, you got to challenge yourselves. And Jeff Mercer, more so than other sports, whether it's basketball or football, is very much of the belief that you have to challenge yourself in non-conference play in order to be your best once conference play comes around. He's a very big proponent of challenging yourself in non-conference play. That's why you see some of these non-conference schedules Indiana's played over the last handful of years.
So let's talk about what happened in Chapel Hill. So they lose all 3 games, and that's the biggest picture, I guess, of it all. You're 0-3 to start the season. That's not necessarily too big of a surprise when you consider the opponent that they were up against to start their 2026 campaign. First game was really competitive whenever Indiana had their starting pitcher in, and then they go to the bullpen, things kind of collapsed. You could argue the same thing happened in game 2 really as well, and things really got away from them there. They got run ruled in 7 innings. And then you have a chance to steal a game in the doubleheader. You're up 3-1, 2 outs, and I don't want to be mean to the kid, and I'm not going to, but there was a ball hit to the second baseman. It was a very routine play that he had to get the ball to first in the game, and then you leave Chapel Hill 1-2, and you're not super satisfied about the weekend, but you got to win against a team that's better than you on their home field. But instead of that, Aiden Stewart, I believe was his name, transfer from Delaware. He throws one of the most, we'll just call it unfortunate misses. It's like he got the yips, I saw somebody say on social media. And then you see somebody, it gets posted on Twitter, it goes viral, probably the most viral baseball clip I saw, at least, again, that my eyes saw, and maybe those eyes aren't too big considering I'm very Indiana focused eyeballs. But the ensuing miss resulted in North Carolina tying the game and then eventually winning in extra innings 4-3. You get swept in the series. Zach, if you're Aiden Stewart, just what goes through your mind as it happens, and then aftermath, you see all this happening online?
Yeah, I've got no idea. It's a tough one. It's the context of it too, because you're a throw away from stealing one in Chapel Hill, which is a big resume boosting win. If Indiana is in fact going to be on the bubble come the end of the season, that's one where down the line Indiana could have pointed to and said, this is why we believe we belong in the tournament. Look at what we did opening weekend down in Chapel Hill. And there's still a little bit of that. I mean, Indiana was still one out in a really, really rare play, a really rare mistake from still winning that game. So there was still a lot of good play, but it was just a really unfortunate error. He's probably you take a page out of the Indiana football book, out of the Fernando Mendoza book, and probably get off social media for a little bit and just clear your head. Luckily it's baseball, so you got another opportunity to turn around and kind of not fix or remedy, but another opportunity to get out there. It's not like you're waiting another week or another week and a half or anything, like if it's football or something. So he's got an opportunity, and he plays Bradley on Tuesday, and then another weekend series, another weekend trip. So he's still got an opportunity, and you just got to put it behind you. You can't let it spiral. I think that's the biggest thing with a play like that, is you can't let it spiral. You have to let it and have to make it be kind of its one-off own type of thing.
You could also take my route, and that's just be self-deprecating. I think self-deprecation is the cure to all, and I'm not saying that necessarily everybody has to do that, but I've never seen self-deprecation go the wrong way, right? And maybe it is best to let this just go under the rug, because it's one of those moments that you let a few days go by, people will forget about it. It is college baseball after all. It's not like everybody's, it's not everybody in the sports sphere, especially as we get closer to March Madness, and particularly for basketball. Not everybody's going to be thinking about that play. But either way, for it to happen on opening weekend, you could blame it on a lot of things. Rust, just a freak play, and just say, kind of like people saying that Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts back with the New York Jets. You could say he was seeing ghosts or whatever it might be, and that's just, of course, a joke. But either way, Hoosiers do have a tough slate ahead. We mentioned the LSU game. I don't want to talk necessarily. I don't want to go game by game or anything. I do want to, before we wrap up on baseball specifically, what are kind of the overall expectations for the Hoosiers this season?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different coming out of that North Carolina series than it was going in. The last couple of years, Indiana's been offensive dominant, one of the best offenses in the conference, year in and year out. Devin Taylor, all-time home run king last year. Corbin Dickerson was a revelation and All-American last year. Indiana, the past couple of years, has churned through elite position players, has churned through elite offenses. And I think there might be a little bit of a shift this season. Not that the offense will be bad. I'm just not sure the offense will be one of those top 2-3 kind of hitting offensive teams in the Big Ten. I still think they'll probably be top half. Jake Hanley, the reigning Big Ten freshman of the year, will still be awesome. He'll still be great. And I think the middle of the order will probably be great. Probably not as much depth in the lineup this year as you'd seen in past years. But I think this year's pitching staff has a chance to be one of the better pitching staffs in Jeff Mercer's tenure, which is 7-8 years now at this point. So I think this will be one of the better pitching staffs Indiana fans will have seen in quite some time. I mean, again, you go 0-3 on the series, you lose the weekend series, and that first doubleheader game on Saturday is a little bit different. You maybe turn to some lower leverage arms, and that kind of 12-run total for North Carolina perhaps gets a little more inflated than it probably would have otherwise. But this is an Indiana team that over the last 3-4 years has not had a designated Friday, Saturday, and Sunday starter, and it looks like at least through one weekend they have that. This is a team that gave up one run through 8 2/3 innings against the number 11 team in the country on a Sunday, when theoretically your arms are more depleted. The bullpen and the pitching staff is more depleted by the time a Sunday rolls around than, a Friday or a Saturday in a series. So I think the pitching staff, there's much higher expectations this year for the pitching staff than there has been in the last couple of years. So I think there might be some role reversal a little bit. It's been Indiana's offense that has had to carry them a lot this season and through the past couple of seasons. And not that the pitching staff will have to carry this Indiana team this year. I think it'll just probably be a little bit more well-balanced. And again, like I said, you're probably looking at an NCAA tournament bubble team, depending on what you do in conference play, depending on maybe you sneak a win against the UCF this upcoming weekend in Jacksonville. You beat Notre Dame, you have a pretty relatively successful weekend down in Jacksonville, but I think you're looking at a non-conference schedule that is shaped to challenge Indiana, and then a conference schedule where you don't have to play UCLA, who's the number one team in the country, but a conference schedule where if you can do what maybe not as expected of you, but if you can compete in conference play, do some things in the Big Ten tournament, come that into the year kind of stretch run, you're looking at a team that could probably make the NCAA tournament, definitely going to be on that bubble.
We'll definitely be following along with Indiana baseball and seeing how their season ends up. But speaking of bubble teams, we're going to talk about a program that's been firmly on the bubble for the last several years. I said with Zach Osterman last week that it kind of feels like Indiana basketball they're in the movie Groundhog Day. Zach, are you too young to know the movie Groundhog Day?
I am not.
Okay, I didn't think so. I feel like it was kind of a universal classic that honestly people might even say I'm too young for Groundhog Day. You and I aren't that far apart in years, if we're being honest. But Indiana finds themselves kind of in a position that they've been in for the last several years. You do have a couple of really good opportunities coming up to close the season, one of them being this Friday, of course, at Purdue. You're coming off a really unfortunate loss, the way that they kind of just imploded down the stretch against Illinois. But again, you already beat Purdue once. You have a chance to sweep them this upcoming Friday. You follow that up with Northwestern at home, Michigan State at home. That would be another top 25 victory if Michigan State stays on the trajectory that they're currently on. And then you round out your 3-game home stretch with Minnesota for senior night, and then you end the year on the road at Ohio State. Is this a manageable – actually, that's an obvious question. Obviously, it's a manageable stretch for Indiana to find themselves on the right side of the bubble. But what do you kind of expect them to do in these final 5 games?
Well, I'm not sure because these are
it's hard to predict this Indiana team. It's really hard.
Because obviously you beat Purdue at home. Mackey's a little bit of a different challenge than playing on your home court. This is the Purdue team that is playing really good basketball as of late, especially after that Nebraska win. So it's Purdue. It's going to be a tough game. You're probably going to need a big game from Lamar Wilkerson amongst others. That Northwestern, that Minnesota game, you're probably circling, okay, you can not guarantee 2 wins, but if you're going to pick out a couple of wins, a couple of games you think you should win, those are 2 that you circle right there. Michigan State's an interesting one because Michigan State's great. They're not elite, but they're really, really good. And you get that game at home. So that's one of those games that it might be the best option of the rest of those ranked games because coming into the Illinois, Purdue, Michigan State kind of segment of the schedule, you're like, maybe get one of those and you feel pretty good about your tournament chances. Well, one of those was already at the window with Illinois. Purdue's tough and Michigan State is at home. So then you close out the season with Ohio State, which that Ohio State game could turn out to be a win and in game for the NCAA tournament, considering where Indiana is and considering where Ohio State is. So it's an important last 5 games. Indiana's got 5 games left, John. You probably need to win 3 games going into the Big Ten tournament to feel relatively comfortable with where you're at.
Yeah, 3 or 4. It probably depends on which. Like if it's just 3, it probably more so depends on who those 3 wins are against. I'd say if you win 4 out of these last 5, and let's just say you lose to Purdue and you split the rivalry series, and then you win out your last 4 games. First of all, ending the regular season on a 4-game winning streak, I mean, that's a really good scenario regardless of who those wins come against. If one of them is a top 25 Michigan State team, we'll see where they are here whenever they face them on March 1st. But if one of those is Michigan State, that's definitely an extra added boost to the resume. But then you take a 4-game winning streak into the Big Ten tournament. I don't know exactly what Indiana's standing would be in the conference at that point. We'll be able to kind of navigate or figure out what that may look like as we get down these last couple of games of the season. But I would say if you go 4 or 5, let's just say it is those final 4 games. I'd say you would be comfortable I would say not comfortably in, you would be in, but kind of teetering. And I think a win in the Big Ten tournament in that scenario would probably solidify you getting in and not having to worry about playing in Dayton either, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting. From the bracketologies that I see and from the people that I see and read and all that stuff, I think 20 wins heading into the Big Ten tournament, 20 overall wins, which would be an 11-9 conference record. 20 wins, and then you take care of business against the team in the Big Ten tournament that you're favored against. A 22 win Indiana or a 21 win Indiana team probably is on the right side of the bubble. You're not 100% sure at that point. I think anything more than 21 wins, again, like you mentioned, considering who it is against. Obviously, if you lose 2 quad 3 games to Northwestern and Minnesota, that throws a little bit of a different wrinkle into things. But you'd expect to win those 2 quad 3 games at home against Northwestern and Minnesota. But the Ohio State game's a big one. Obviously, the ranked opponents in Purdue and Michigan State. But I think you're looking at, if you get those 3 regular season wins, if you can get to 20 wins by the time the Big Ten tournament rolls around, you take care of business. You're going to probably be 9, 10, 11 seed in the Big Ten tournament. You take care of business against a Rutgers or a Maryland or an Oregon or somebody like that in your first game of the Big Ten tournament. I think you're probably okay with 21 total wins and 11-9 record in conference play. You're probably the right side of the bubble. Anything more than that, I think you'd be not comfortably in, but relatively comfortable.
And then the last thing we'll talk about, and we'll wrap this thing up. Let's just hypothetically say Indiana does get into the NCAA tournament. It doesn't matter if it's first 4, an 8, 9 seed, whatever it might be. They do have somebody on their roster that Lamar Wilkerson isn't good enough by himself to carry him to a Final Four per se. Indiana would probably need a little more. They would need more elite type pieces to go along with him. What I should say is more consistent pieces to go along with him if we were going to be throwing that scenario out there. But I do think if you get good performances in the NCAA tournament from Tucker DeVries and Connor Enright, kind of like the way you were during the stretch where Indiana won 5 of 6. I'm kind of eliminating that Illinois game that just happened. If you can get prime Lamar Wilkerson and consistent to semi-consistent to consistent performances from those 2 guys who I just mentioned, and maybe even a couple of others like Nick Dorn and the like, if you can get those types of performances in the NCAA tournament, I'd say best case scenario, Indiana could find themselves in the second weekend, maybe. Again, and this is based solely on the fact that Indiana has a player like Lamar Wilkerson. If the matchups are right and he's having 30-point performances or close to it and getting enough help, there's a chance you could see them exceed that Sweet 16 potentially. And again, I'm just throwing out the hypothetical scenario in which Indiana, first of all, gets to the tournament and has that opportunity. It's been a very long time. I would say that within the last, I don't want to say last 10 years, at least I would say at the guard position where Indiana has somebody that can legitimately put them on their back and lead them to a win. You could argue that Jalen Hood-Schifino could do that, but really with that team, it was about the duo of Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis. I feel like one complemented the other. This team focuses a lot more, or relies a whole lot more on a big time performance from a Lamar Wilkerson, more so than a team like that a few years ago did.
Yeah, and JHS not quite the 3-level scorer that Lamar is. Lamar has range out to 30 feet. JHS wasn't as an elite, or wasn't as potent of a 3-point shooter, but you're exactly right. What team is stopping, should Indiana get to the tournament, is stopping a Lamar Wilkerson 40-point performance? Like, it's difficult to get into the way of a guy. If Lamar Wilkerson, he has that capability, he can say, you know what, I see you on the other side of the court. I see the defense that is guarding me, but it doesn't matter. There are some performances, you think to Penn State, you think to Oregon. There are just some games this year, and he's shown the ability to have these games on a relatively consistent basis where it doesn't matter how you guard him. It doesn't matter who's guarding him. It doesn't necessarily matter who Indiana's playing. He can go for 40 against pretty much anybody. And I think that's kind of that silver lining is you think of, how do you upset a team that's a higher seed than you in the NCAA tournament? You think of, got to have good guard play. Indiana's got that with Lamar Wilkerson, with his ability to go off. You're probably going to have to shoot above average from 3-point range, at least above your season average. And Indiana while they've struggled a little bit as of late from 3-point range, is still a team. Should a Nick Dorn have it going? Should a Tucker DeVries have it going? Should a Lamar Wilkerson have it going? Should all three of those guys, and I know this is rare, and again, we're talking hypotheticals, but should all three of those guys have it going and you get a 35-point performance from Lamar Wilkerson, you get one of those 7-3 performances from Nick Dorn, and then you get an 18, 10, and 5 from Tucker DeVries, I'm not saying you're going to if you're an 8 or 9 seed, you're going to upset a 1 seed in the second round, but it's a recipe for success. It's a recipe to pull off an upset when you have guys like Lamar Wilkerson that can go for 30, 35 plus pretty much on any given night, it seems like. And you've got a guy like Tucker DeVries that has been around the game so long that it's been a while, but we saw it against Marquette where he can go for a 25.4 first half or something like that. Or Nick Dorn when he was extraordinarily hot from three and shooting 50% from the corners. It felt like an automatic from 3-point range at some point. So again, should Indiana get to the tournament, you like the way that Indiana is built to win a round one game that Indiana probably is the lower seed, or I guess the higher numbered seed. So the 9 or the 10 is probably where Indiana's probably looking at. You like your chances to potentially pull off a win in a game that you're not favored in because of that ability to just do things that are unguardable. And Lamar Wilkerson scoring 40 points and making 8 threes, there's some times that you just can't really guard that as an opposing defense, obviously. And then you get into the nitty gritty of, okay, if a team overshadows on Lamar, then Tucker DeVries. So there's obviously ways around it if you're a defense to kind of throw more bodies at Lamar, but then it opens up things for everybody else. So, but long story short, Indiana is set up, and the way that the offense is run and the way they have the shooters, it's conducive to a team that can pull off an upset in March Madness should they get there.
And by the way, just for those who are listening, I don't want people to get carried away thinking I'm saying Indiana should make an Elite Eight, that sort of thing. I'm just throwing out the idea that there are weird runs you get from teams built like in Indiana where you don't expect them to make it all the way to that level of the tournament. So that's just something to keep an eye on. I just want to throw that out there. Zach, what's coming up for you before I let you go? You doing play-by-play for Indiana baseball here soon?
We don't actually have our baseball schedule finalized yet, so still working on getting that finalized. I do have the IU student radio broadcast of the IU-Purdue game coming up on Friday, so that'll be a good one in Mackey. I'm excited to do that, but pretty much just same old, same old. I mean, Indiana football still in kind of the recruiting phase right now, still spring practice a little bit away, so still got plenty of coverage there, obviously right in the thick of it with basketball and baseball, so just pretty much the same old with me right now.
Zach, I appreciate you as always, and we'll try and get you on again here later on in the season.
Thank you for having me, John. Always happy to be here.
Big thanks to Zach. Appreciate him as always. Great guest to have on the show. Very knowledgeable and great contributor to thehoosier.com. Be sure to check out his Twitter page at Zach. Well, I was going to say I don't have the username right in front of me. You can find him on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. You search Zach Browning, you'll find him. He's a part of thehoosier.com. He has plenty of good stuff on the website. Not just baseball related either. So if baseball's not your thing, be sure to check out all that he's written. We have a great staff, of course, with the Hoosier. All right, a couple more things, and then we'll wrap up today's show. I want to talk first. This will be probably pretty brief, but I do want to give my thoughts on the ruling with Trinidad Chambliss. First, he was ruled ineligible, right, for Ole Miss for next season. And then they take it to a court inside of the state of Mississippi as opposed to just letting the NCAA rule him one way or another. And he gets granted his 6th year of eligibility. Now, I'm not going to argue whether it's right or wrong because that's not really up to me. Of course, as somebody who wants my team to have a better chance to win, I wish that he wasn't eligible because Trinidad Chambliss is a heck of a player. But we've got to start setting some guardrails, right? Like, it feels like whenever they created the COVID senior, they started granting all these extra years of eligibility. It created an eternal gray area for players at any sport, college basketball, football, whatever it might be, to basically be able to bargain their way to having eligibility that in previous years did not exist. And then you had all of this JUCO stuff with, that began with Diego Pavia, whenever, before he got to Vanderbilt, claiming that he had more eligibility because he wasn't at the D1 level initially. And that's the same thing that happened with Trinidad Chambliss, I believe. And so it's unfortunate that the NCAA has just never, it seems like they're never prepared for anything, and they're always able to get overrun by other entities. And it further goes along with the argument that they have virtually no power with anything. I mean, they can make the rulings, and I guess they have, like, players and coaches have to abide by them unless a higher power of a court, whatever it might be, says otherwise. But it just seems like it's a complete free for all. And I do think that we are heading towards a day and age in college football and really the rest of college sports as a whole where you're going to see more guardrails when it comes to eligibility, NIL. I think you'll start seeing more clear-cut contracts, multi-year contracts, so it's not just one-and-done players. And when I say one-and-done, I don't just mean like guys playing for 1 year, going to the NFL or the NBA. I just mean one-and-done at the school and then playing for 6 different schools before you eventually graduate. It's complete nonsense. It wouldn't surprise me if you see that happen within the next, even as early as next season. There's been a lot of push for a lot of things, and to happen quickly, just to make the game and systems of college football much more palatable. And I think that's something that they're going to work very hard to find a more permanent solution for everybody. And something else that a lot of people are chattering about too is football playoff expansion once again. And I mean, I say once again, it's been happening ever since they expanded to 12 teams, even before that. But the Big Ten has, I think it was a leaked proposal, it may even be official at this point, that they want a 24-team format. I'll go ahead and just kind of give you the bullet points here. A 24-team field with the top 8 seeds receiving first-round buys. That's a good thing. The first 2 rounds, 16 teams total, will be played on the campus of the higher-seeded team. So you have 2 rounds of on-campus games. That's only a good thing. You'll have the elimination of conference championship games. I think that's a good idea as well. When you're adding to the calendar and you're already worried about going further into January and you want to kind of reduce that as best as you can, one way to mitigate that is to remove the conference championship games that really are becoming less and less necessary. I hate to say that they're not special, because Indiana's Big Ten championship game was definitely special for them and a good accomplishment. But having the championship game, it doesn't, in most scenarios, it doesn't have a whole lot of meaning. This year with Indiana and Ohio State, it definitely did, of course. You're battling for the 1-seed Heisman Trophy. That is a rare circumstance. You don't always get 1 versus 2. We haven't had it in 15 years, I believe. And who knows when we'll have that again. I mean, maybe sooner rather than later, but who's to know that before it actually happens? You have the format also suggests 23 at-large spots and 1 auto bid for the highest-ranked group of 6 team. And then this would also be a slow progression. You would have a 16-team playoff for 2027 and 2028, moving to 24 teams by 2029. I don't understand why you have to progress that way. I mean, I guess it just makes it slower, a gradual change for certain things, but they would also still honor the New Year's 6 bowl sites with the quarterfinals and semifinals. I'm going to cough real quick. Excuse me. But I think one other thing that needs to be added to this, and this is something that Mitchell Page and I were going back and forth a little bit on, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on this show here in the future, and that's the elimination of bowl games. There are pros and cons to having the bowl games. You get extra practices. Really, in this day and age, when a lot of players are opting out, you get a lot of your younger guys some more reps, live game reps against another team. Of course, you need to go to a destination. There's the bowl game experience for the players. Like, all that's fine and dandy. But big picture stuff, who really cares about any of the games that aren't the playoff? And I know that might be a rough take, right? And I'm sure some people will hear that and think, "Oh, bowl games are awesome." Like you have the Big Ten versus the SEC. You have a chance for conference supremacy, whatever you want to throw out there. But what are you really playing for? And when it's all said and done, like like big picture stuff. And I don't, for some reason, my brain's going to Iowa. And I know Iowa got a really good win against Vanderbilt. And this is no knock. Jeffrey the Greek, if you happen to hear this, I mean, this is no knock against the Hawkeyes. What is the big picture win? Like the overall, like what is the benefit of Iowa winning that game for seasons to come? Like for next year, what does that do for them? Maybe it does something that I don't realize what it does in terms of recruiting. I feel like that stuff used to have more of an impact on recruiting than it does. But what really matters in the postseason is what happens in the playoff. That's where all the eyes are. That's where all of the ratings are. I mean, people watch the bowl games. Not as much as they used to, but people do watch the bowl games. But it's something that I'd like to hear Mitchell Page's argument for. Because I think if you eliminate bowl games, you start the season in week 0, you just make week 0 week 1, and then you're no longer having calendar issues. If you can play the playoff throughout when the bowl games will be played, instead of having these extra 2 weeks off, excuse me, then you don't have to worry about the season going all the way to Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And you can have the season done within that first week of January, and you're no longer competing with the NFL, which is why all these games are on Wednesday and Thursday. And nobody wants to watch a playoff game on a weekday, especially at the college level. There's a reason the NFL's playoffs aren't on the weekday. I mean, they would still dominate the ratings if they did that, but like, people want to watch them on the weekends. That's why they can put their games there, and the college will not, because if they're competing against the NFL, they're going to lose. So that's my little rant on this, and I don't know how. Feel free to sound off in the comments what you all think about 2014 playoff. I know I'm happy with where it is right now at 12, but the calendar's all screwed up. That's another conversation for another day. So we'll go ahead and in just a minute, we're going to wrap this up. I do want to do a quick roundup of the sports we have not had a chance to talk about. I'm not going to do baseball, of course, that we just talked about. That was Zach Browning. But quick check-in on Indiana women's basketball. Last time they had come off a win against Purdue, 74-59. They just finished their West Coast road trip. Unfortunately, were not very successful. Only suffered a 6-point loss at USC, 79-73, but quite a beatdown to UCLA, 92-48. They'll return home to face Oregon later this week. And Indiana basketball, women's basketball, 14-13. Not a great year for them and Terry Moore, and hopefully they'll be able to bounce back this offseason and get more prepared for. They've lost generational talent. I've said that multiple times when we've talked about women's basketball. Hopefully Terry Moore can get things turned around heading into next year. And then softball. I'm glad we're wrapping this up because I'm starting to get the coughs a little bit. But Indiana softball, they were off to a really good start. This most recently, they played in the Littlewood Invitational. They completely ransacked Portland State 23-0 in 5 innings. Followed that up with an unfortunate 1-run loss to number 22 Arizona State, 7-6. They bounced back against Pacific, 8-0 in 5 innings. And then defeated Nevada 1 out of 2 games, 6-3, lost 2-4 in the second. And then they'll be playing in the USF tournament later this weekend. Their current record to start the season is at 7-3. All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Glad the voice has hung in there with me. But until next week, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports. Let's try that one more time. This has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.